Oh, that's real good.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the 11:11 podcast, where we talk everything about the entrepreneurial journey and how it's all in the stars. My name is Matthew.
I'm Simone.
And I'm Donnie.
And we're here for an exciting episode where we're going to actually talk to Solomon Mangham. So typically we talk to folks who are either like solopreneurs who that's their main business, but actually today's episode is going to be super interesting because we're going to talk to Solomon about how he is literally a multi-hyphenate. He has his hands in a lot of different things and is somehow juggling it all and doing it at a high level. So Solomon, if you could just introduce yourself to the folks at home and then give us a little bit about what it is that you do.
Yeah, thank you for that. Excited to be here. So I'm Solomon. I'm from Atlanta. I'm based in New York. I went to Howard University. I'm a noob. Just put that out there. I work on Wall Street, so I buy and sell companies. I take risks for a living, and I try to do that in my personal life. So we'll get into the different facets, but that's me at a high level.
Professional risk taker.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
That's good. We're going to put that on Instagram.
I just charge a little finder's fee. Nothing.
I like it.
No, but that's dope. That's dope. So you you said a lot in a short amount of time. So you went to Howard, HU. You are new. When you were in college, did you always know that you wanted to get into what you're doing now, or was it a path that you kind of stumbled into along the way?
Yeah, I played basketball at Howard. Okay. So my goal was to play overseas, but I was in the School of Business, and I quickly realized that a lot of the dudes and girls at Howard were doing really cool things. So I kind of was watching them, and people were going to investment banking on Wall Street. People were doing these different amazing things. So I said, I don't jump that high. I'm good at basketball, but I wasn't that athletic. So I said, long term, it's probably better I try to use my brain than my legs that didn't jump that high.
I got you. It is working out for you.
Yeah.
And so private equity, how did you specifically land in that? Because that's a very niche field within business.
Yeah. So it's funny. It actually random. Robert Smith spoke at Morehouse College, and he gave a scholarship to all the graduating seniors in, I don't know, maybe 2018 or 2019. I saw that. I literally Googled him, and I said, what does Robert Smith do? And that was then what I was going to do. So a lot of people that I work with now, they've been wanting to be on Wall Street working private equity since they were 15 years old, whether it was their parents or somehow they got exposed to it. I was a late bloomer. I was maybe 25, and I kind of just said, all right, this is what I'm doing, and I kind of just made it happen. And that's been a good thing and a kind of a challenge with my life where I've just tried to make things happen randomly.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, especially in an industry like that, because that's not something that's like naturally passed down
Yeah.
all the time, especially in our community.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, you branched off into that, but did you have people that were like giving you game, or were you figuring it out on your own?
More of the latter, really. I had to try to figure it out. I knew people that were doing it, or I ran into people that were doing it as I decided I wanted to do it, but yeah, certainly it was an uphill battle, and it wasn't easy, and still isn't easy. But I did notice in my first 4 years, I've ran into very few people that look like me. We're trying to change that, obviously, but it's true in the current.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I could relate to you in the sense of discovering your niche later on. I know for me it was consulting, and I didn't even know what that was till someone told me about it at an internship for something else. So as you made that decision to pursue that field, for you, what were some of the initial places you went to educate yourself about it, to first kind of figure out, how do I actually approach this industry?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, you hit something very important, is exposure.
Yeah.
A lot of people that look like us just aren't exposed to many things. And that's why we have to talk about what we do. We have to talk about the things you can do beyond sports and music and the things that are cool, that we all kind of grow up and say, I want to be this, I want to be that. So it was really exposure. And then I tried to, once I kind of understood the different pieces, I tried to kind of just get into those different spaces and try to network my way. And when I started to interview for private equity, I was going in kind of blind, and I was not doing well in the interviews. And then over time, I kind of learned the game, learned how to speak the language. And there were people that kind of pulled me up, both peers and then kind of mentors that I met, that were able to help get me across the finish line.
There you go. Nice.
Oh, interesting. And then, obviously we mentioned that you have your hands in so many different things. Private equity, that's a field that it could be very lucrative. So what is it that made you want to do something else rather than just go deeper into that?
Yeah, so private equity and Wall Street generally, finance generally is all about taking something, improving it, and gaining some capital gain or some economic gain. So what I do on my day job is I buy a business, I try to improve it, make it bigger, make it bigger, more products, better customer service, more customers, and then you try to sell that or list it on the stock market. And so it's taking something, making it better, and then kind of putting it elsewhere. I do the same thing with real estate, right? It's you buy a house, you add a bedroom, you add a roof, you make the door a nice, pretty color, and then you sell that to someone else. And you're taking something, improving it, and selling it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the exact same thing. And then with business, it's the exact same thing where I'm investing in a company or I'm starting a company, trying to make it better and trying to sell it. So it's all kind of the same to me. The concepts are the same around sales, marketing, corporate infrastructure, whatever, and doing it at a high level. So it's all pretty incestuous to me.
That makes sense. It makes sense. Once you figure out one way to make money, figure out another way to be able to do it and take it to another.
Yeah, it's that's exactly it. It's like taking the playbook from Wall Street to Main Street. I try to joke with that with my friends where we're talking about stuff. And I'm like, well, like I do this for a living. Trust me, like if we do these two things, it's going to grow revenue by X and we're all going to be happy.
Right.
So you try to learn from one thing and bring it to other things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, smart. And I know in the industries that you're discussing, there's such a big part in like figuring out the operations of a business.
Yep,
And then like figuring out from there, how do you make it more efficient?
exactly.
Sometimes that's not just a headcount thing. That could just be strategies, investing in the right thing. So for you, what are some, in your experiences, what are some things you've noticed that have been kind of trends in how to improve and grow a business?
Yeah, I think, and you hit on it in consulting, that's all it is,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's what are the strategic initiatives or the things I need to do to improve this? So I think what I've seen is you need great leadership. So, I'm a good investor, but I don't know if I'm a great CEO. You need to figure out what you are. Do you need to be behind the scenes or do you need to be the person leading the charge? Or do you need to just be on the team and have someone kind of directing you based on your skills? It's about sales. So obviously you need to, whatever you're selling, whether it's a drink, a consulting service, or you're building houses, you need to be able to sell yourself and establish why your product or service is differentiated and is interesting for that customer. And then you need to have customers that like you and, want to spend more money with you. And that's how you grow a business and you get more customers and more success.
Smart.
That makes sense. And then for a lot of the things that you're doing, are you doing it on your own, your more entrepreneurial endeavors, or have you started to assemble a team? Whereas you said you can figure out this is my role, but I need to be able to make sure I have my person who is, they're the front man or they're the person that's doing X.
Yeah, great question. I think this might be a hot take, but I think in our community, we always want to be in the front, taking all the credit. I think that is not the way to have success.
Mm-hmm.
So as an investor, I'm invested in probably 8 to 12 companies, pending at any given time. Like I don't need to tell people I'm invested in those companies. I don't need to go tell people I'm the CEO of those companies. When they do well or they don't do well, I'm a beneficiary or I'm, a sad person. I believe in partnership. And I think subject matter expertise is key. So for me, time is what I'm short on. I don't have a lot of time. I want to be social. I want to work my day job, which is a very encompassing day job. I work 7 days a week on my day job.
Yeah.
And then I want to do these other things entrepreneurially. So on my real estate business, my partner, he's a realtor in DC. He knows the market like the back of his hand. He knows real estate like the back of his hand. And then I have another partner who's more of an operational kind of construction guy.
Mm-hmm.
So they're the subject matter expertise. I know finance, so I can help to structure the deal and figure out how to make it more profitable for us, but it's a team venture there. Then on my drink business, I'm partnering with a guy who he runs the day-to-day operations. I'm more in the back. But I help to kind of guide and strategy and figure out how do we make this better and market it better. But I'm not doing the day-to-day operations. And so I think as we think about expanding and doing different things, always find someone who's a subject matter expert because you probably are not the subject matter expert unless it's your core thing. Private equity, I'm the subject matter expert. These other things, I'm less of that.
How do you bring how do you continue to bring your subject matter expertise to the table after like just going after different things? So like you said, the drink company, and now you're doing the investment company. How are you able to kind of take the skills from corporate and apply that to the things that you're doing now?
One is kind of humility, knowing what you're good at, what you're not good at, and knowing where you are not the subject matter expert. That's the first thing. Am I good at this or not?
Being
Yes
real
or
with
no.
yourself.
Being real with yourself,
Yeah.
being self-reflective, and that's another thing that I think people struggle with.
Yeah.
But understanding there's someone who does this better than me, let them run the show and I'll be their sidekick, and not letting ego or some other factor get in the way of that. And so I think that's really it. You say, this is interesting. Can I add value here? Yes or no? And do I think it's a good idea? And do I trust this person? So it's all about finding that expertise. And then if you have trust and you have kind of partnership, then it should work out. And if it doesn't work out, then you have a learning, but it's not because you structured it and you weren't in a position to be successful.
How do you approach picking the right partner?
I think it's about trust. I'm probably over trusting. I kind of go by like, how someone kind of carries themselves, and then also if they know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
That's very important. But I think trust is the most important thing, because like my drink business, I don't check the financials on a daily basis to see if some funny business is happening, because I trust my partner. In real estate, if I tell my partner that the construction budget's going to be X, he believes that it's going to be X, not that it's Y and I'm pocketing something. Like that's crazy. So I think trust is most important. And then after that, you can kind of figure out everything else.
Love that.
And then, so it sounds like you have a lot of knowledge that you gained in a relatively short amount of time. But take us back to when you were growing up. You say you grew up in Atlanta.
Yeah.
I don't know what your family dynamic was like, but did you have somebody or people that you saw that you were like, all right, they may not be doing exactly what I want to do, but there's things that I could pull from that later in life you're now pulling from?
Yeah, I would say, so I grew up in Atlanta. My dad was a politician. My mom was a nurse. So I grew up very middle class. I was never kind of struggling, but I didn't have everything that, I hope to give to my children in the future. And so I think as a kid, I was always entrepreneurial. Like I'd sold water at church, and I was like, walking to Sam's Club, I can buy this for 25 cents and I can sell it for $2 to a sweating church patron.
In the middle of Holy Ghost, you selling it.
Listen, church is a business too. So that was my first thing. Then when I was in middle school, I started a lawn mowing company. So I said, okay, I'm paying this guy, or my parents are paying this guy $150. I could do a lot with $150, and I'm not doing anything but playing video games. So started a lawn mowing company. And then when I was in high school, I started a sneaker reselling company and like a fashion sourcing kind of company. And that's what made me a very wealthy teenager, because I was selling a lot of sneakers, and I was, on Saturday morning, it's like, all right, it's game day. How many pairs can we buy and flip them in a couple of days? So I've always been very entrepreneurial. And there were people that were like, I think there were people that were like buying real estate and stuff like that. So that kind of exposed me to real estate. One of my big bros, Thomas Reynolds, who's a entertainment lawyer in Atlanta. He's like my blood brother almost. He was buying real estate in his 20s when he first graduated from law school, and just doing cool things. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna buy some real estate. That's what I'm gonna do when I get some money. And so I bought my first property at 24, because I'm like, I'm gonna do that.
Wow. So, I mean, clearly the entrepreneurial spirit, you've always had that bug.
Yep.
So am I right in saying that no matter what you were going to do, even though you didn't know exactly what it was, you knew that in some capacity, you had to be able to figure out how to do it in an entrepreneurial capacity while still potentially maintaining a day job?
Yeah. And my dad, he is almost 70, so he has this like very, antiquated view that you can't have a boss, and no one successful has a boss. I think that's true in some regard, and even in my day job, I don't feel like I have a boss necessarily. I certainly do, obviously, but it's very entrepreneurial, where I need to go and identify investment opportunities, find a company. They need to like me and my team. We need to invest in it, and then once we've invested and we own it, it's now entrepreneurship 101. How do you make this better in the next 3 to 5 years? So even in the kind of the lane that I've chosen, it's still very entrepreneurial and how it kind of actually happens on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. And then when you're looking for, or you and your partners are looking for new opportunities, are there certain verticals that you're like, I know that these have high potential, or is it just kind of based off your passion points?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question too, because I think just putting an investor hat on, a good investor picks their spots no matter what they're investing in. If you invest in nightlife, you need to pick your spots and pick the streets you want your clubs or restaurants to be on. If you're in real estate, you need to pick the areas in that city that are interesting and those that are not interesting. And you have to say, like, I don't participate in that because I don't know it well or because I've decided that that's less interesting. So kind of in my day job, I focus on healthcare, and my firm's built a great expertise there. And so we go into the healthcare markets from kind of delivering patient outcomes to kind of the back end where we're servicing pharma companies on their marketing efforts or their technology efforts, whatever it is. And so we know that space well, and so we attack that well. There are other areas too. And then in my personal real estate ventures, I like the Atlanta market, the DC market, and the Chicago markets because I can go to all three of those cities and drive without a GPS.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that this street in Chicago, don't go over there.
Right.
I know in Atlanta that there's going to be something that's being built in this particular area, so everything within a 5-mile catchment area is going to appreciate more than others. I know in DC that you have a landlocked geography. Everyone wants to live in DC, but there isn't a lot of housing.
Mm.
So why not be in DC? And in particular, let's go east of the river because that's been less developed. Let's go to Trinidad because that's been less developed and it's closer to, all the stuff that people want to be near. And so I've kind of picked my spots and, I do that in companies I invest in as well.
Smart. And then one thing I want to talk to you about is too is time, because private equity, Wall Street, you are working 7 days a week almost. So for you, as you're doing that and wanting to do well in that position while also pouring enough into your other ventures, how do you approach your time and how do you invest in it? And kind of what are some of the ways in which you create the right cadence of connection so that you're still on top of things and they're moving forward, but you're still able to do each of them successfully?
Yeah, so time, I think that you have to be intentional with productivity and you also have to be intentional with rest. So like I said, I'm working or thinking about work 7 days a week. And I think the concept of work-life balance, I have assumed that is not relevant for me in the near, short, or midterm. I'm gonna figure that out later. But I think that I also intentionally rest. So I have hobbies that I intentionally invest in, and I decide like on Saturday morning, pretty much every Saturday I play basketball. And if I'm not in town, I try to go fishing or I try to do these different things that I know kind of refill my cup and kind of bring me back to life because I do live a very kind of stressful life. Those 7 days aren't like comfortable either. And so it's about kind of intentionality. And then I think with kind of managing the core of kind of what I do, who I am, and then the side quests, as I always joke, because they're so similar, it's almost like I'm doing the same exact thing where I'm thinking about how do I strategically make this asset or company better. So it's all kind of gratuitous and the same thing. But I have to always remember that like my day job is my core and my core is my core and everything else is secondary. And I proceed, accordingly with that mindset.
Smart.
Yeah. And then, so in terms of where you see yourself going with all these endeavors, is your goal to, potentially, I don't know, start a fund? Like where do you see this going? Because as you mentioned, as you continue to do any of your endeavors, time is the one thing that you don't necessarily always have a lot of.
Yep.
But I would imagine as an investor, naturally you want to grow your portfolio. So is it that you want to potentially, widen your aperture and add more businesses? Or is it that you want to continue to hone in on the ones that you have and just go as deep as you can?
Yeah, so on kind of generally, I plan to have my own fund one day. I want to have my own fund. I think it's an interesting opportunity to kind of guide where capital goes. I think there's an opportunity to invest more in things that are started and led by people that look like me. And then I think there's an opportunity to just put capital in areas where I particularly find interesting, both in my current setting and then, 20, 30 years down the road. From a real estate standpoint, I certainly want to build a portfolio there. I would love to own hundreds of thousands of units. And from a business standpoint, I plan to continue to invest in businesses as a silent investor or as a minority investor or even a majority investor where I'm not kind of leading the show and I'm not the person making all the decisions. So that, expansion, as you said, is certainly it, but you have to do it with kind of a minimalist approach where you're as hands-off as you can, and then in the things that are your core and the things that you have the expertise, you're as hands-on as you can.
Mhm. Okay.
Smart. As you're looking at, I know you talked about your investments into smaller companies, so I'm going to assume, are you looking at like seed stage companies?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've invested in mostly thus far kind of startup companies.
Okay.
But I'm also starting to think about where I can invest in kind of mature cash flowing companies as well.
Okay.
So I plan to probably buy a company in the next 18 months that's doing, it's not something that's sexy and high flying, but like the guy that drives in the truck and fixes people's roofs.
Yeah.
It's a very nice cash flowing business. And so I'm looking at stuff like that as well. And so, you just have to have the areas where you think are interesting and decide, I don't know this well enough to invest $1, so I'm not going to.
Mm-hmm. And then as you're making your picks on investments, and I'll maybe talk to the startups more, what are you looking at? Because this is a very turbulent time for startups.
Yeah.
I was in a few of them myself. So what are you looking at to make sure you feel strongly about the investment you're making when it comes to startups?
So not to be too financy, but you got to think like risk adjusted returns. So in the back of my head, I know that every startup could fail, and it's more likely to fail than it is to succeed. And then as I think about different startups, I'm thinking about, what are they doing, and are they special in what they're doing? Is there a reason why they should grow 10x from where they are today? And you have to kind of decide, do you think that this has the potential to have like a moonshot growth where it's like, it's something now and then it's Google, then it's YouTube, and then the leader of it is probably more important than even what they've built thus far, because I'm a delusional person myself. I delusionally think I can do everything, or I can achieve everything, and I delusionally think the things that I'm not good at, I can coach myself and self-learn my way into being good at them. I similarly want to see someone who's at the helm of that startup that's like has that mindset where they wake up every day and they think that they're going to be the best at building podcast equipment. Whatever it is, they should be thinking they're the best at it, and that's the person I would want to partner with or invest in.
Smart. Yeah.
Looking from the investment side, I'm sure you're looking at plans and business plans, and you're like, okay, I don't want to invest in that, and I do want to invest in this. What do you think is missing, just as advice to business owners? Like, what do you think businesses are missing for those ones where you're shaking your head and you're like, nah, I don't want to go that route?
I think the core thing is kind of like the leadership of those companies. Sometimes they aren't very self-aware, and they aren't open and honest with themselves and then a potential investor about where they're strong or where they're weak. And that needs to be a discussion. When you make an investment in a company, you should know that these 3 things are going phenomenally well, and this is what's going to take me to a good outcome. But at the same time, I should know these are the 3 things that could take me out. I should know that if it's a clothing business, I know my manufacturing situation, they have too much control over me. I should know that my cost per unit is too high, and I should know that I need to tackle that eventually. And I should know that I have a competitor they have a better product than me and they better market it than me. And I need to have a way that I can go elsewhere and try to, get some leadership in a market or something that's I can repeat elsewhere. And so I think that's top of mind, and kind of that self-awareness. And then I think also, people, I think, go out and they don't consult others enough. And so if you're pitching an investor, you should have already pitched every single one of your friends, every single one of your family members, every single person that has ever, like for a drink business, I should pitch every person I know that's ever sold a drink. If you own a liquor store, I'm calling you first. If you own a grocery store, I've called you. If you get hungover all the time, I'm calling you. Why do you get hungover? What is the experience? How quickly do you want it to be solved? We did all that for NextDay, but that's just something else you have to do, is really understand, kind of
your product,
test it, understand the customer, what they want, understand the market. And typically you're going to get that from a conversation with 100 people that you're going to distill into, a small couple sentences that guide you in what you're trying to do.
Love that.
That's dope. That's super dope. And something that you talked about at the beginning, like the genesis of you even getting onto your path, was Robert Smith, and that person kind of being someone who you saw as a way to be able to get to a path. Who are some of those inspirations now, and how do you kind of stay not only knowledgeable, because clearly you do a lot of your research in terms of going on a path, but how do you kind of stay up to date so that you can figure out how to be able to get to the path of whoever that person is?
Yeah, I think, again, I'm going to keep saying it, self-awareness.
Mhm.
It's understanding that I don't know this. I need to go acquire that information or that knowledge. And typically you can do that from one person who's done it at a high level. So
Was that always your approach, though? Or did
absolutely.
something have to happen for you to be like, okay, I should really back up and let somebody else handle this?
No, it's always been, I need a
Okay.
mentor, or I need to ask somebody who's done it before. And if
Mhm.
they haven't done the specific thing, what have they done that's similar, tangential, or related? And I can take those learnings and put them here. Um, I think it's silly to try to be a student and not have a teacher. That doesn't make no sense.
Right.
Mhm.
So I've always taken that approach. So like my life now, I'll say Robert Smith, who's Vista Equity Partners, who started the biggest and the best software investment firm. In my first job, I was a software investor. I'll say Reggie Lewis. Reggie Lewis is passed now, but he was the first person to own and operate $1 billion business. There's 5 other private equity Wall Street guys that I watch their YouTube videos. I watch how they invest. I watch
Mhm.
what they talk about. I watch what they say they stopped doing when they were 20, 30, 40. There. And then in my personal life, I have 2 guys that I think are like my omens, Fred Green and Arinze McGuali, who are both frat brothers of mine. But Fred is a real estate investor. So when I was in college, he kind of taught me how to do real estate. And he took me into $100 million developments when I was 21. And this is a black guy who's 35, and he's telling me, this is what I'm doing right now. This is how we're doing it. This is what I'm struggling with, and this is how we are going to make this a good outcome. And so seeing that at 21, it helped my delusion to say, okay, I can go do that. I can own 100 units when I'm 35.
Mhm.
That's light. Arinze, he's a guy who just kind of leads with integrity and leads with excellence. So I saw him kind of doing really dope things in the marketing world and in the kind of the consumer facing world. And so he's helped me a lot in terms of, one, kind of being a good person, a hardworking guy, a trustworthy guy, but then also taking learnings from that into my day job even, and understanding how do you take something and market it better or guide someone to marketing something better. And those 2 guys, I asked them everything and all things that I have on my mind. Like,
Mhm.
I've asked Fred like anything. I mean, I asked him anything and everything. And I typically, again, as a student of the game, as we say, I want to get a perspective before I do anything because I might be doing something stupid.
Right.
I want somebody to tell me I'm being stupid.
Right.
And then I can decide, am I, equipped to pursue the stupidity and make it a good outcome or not,
Mhm.
and try to, make a decision thereafter.
Yeah. It sounds like it's more so like strategic delusion.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. I mean, at the end of the day,
Yeah.
you have to be at some degree of crazy
Yeah.
in order to be able to want to achieve something. But you're clearly matching that with actual research and not being afraid to talk to people and
Yeah.
ask questions. And I think as entrepreneurs and people who just want to succeed in life, I think those are important qualities that I think anyone who wants to achieve something should be able to have a little bit of. But is there anything kind of like to close out? Is there anything that you would give advice to, whether it's a younger you or even just a young person at home who's thinking about getting into any of the arenas that you're talking about?
Yeah, I would say 3 things. So one is the delusion. I think it's important. I think you need to wake up and think that you can do anything.
Mhm.
When you get pushed down or shot down, you should think that I can get up and I can pursue this and I can do it with excellence and I can do it better. So that's the first thing. I would say the second thing is like work ethic. So I think that the most successful men and women in the world are very hard workers, and they have a insatiable drive where they're trying to achieve something. They're running into walls. They're running through walls. The third thing I'd say is ego. When I was younger, I always had an ego because I was an athlete, and it was not self-confidence. It was an ego where I said, "Oh, I'm too good for that. I don't need to do that. I had a great season. I don't need to work out this hard. I did this, so I don't need to do that." And so it's making decisions based on your ego. As I got older, that started to catch up with me when I was in rooms with people that were just as capable as me or more capable than me. So I couldn't get by just, like I could in my small market at my high school, for example. So dropping ego, you still need to be self-aware of how, incredible you are, how, strong you are at these things. But I think that is really important. And then the final thing I would just say is just be, a good person. I think that goes a long way. I think, I've made tens of hundreds of people, thousands of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And there's not a single person that can say I've ever done them dirty in business or tried to screw them over or tried to do anything, whether it was $200 or $2 million. That's just not me. And I think that's something that's going to pay me dividends in the future, because I will have opportunities to get over on somebody or to do something without ethics, but I just wouldn't. That's not in me.
Yeah, that's super important. And honestly, that's something that we don't hear enough of. But that really is a key and a gem that hopefully folks at home are really going to apply, because the more people who are trying to do right and do good, the more good that's actually going to come to them.
Yeah.
I think more people realize that we'll have a lot more successful people out there.
Yep.
But Solomon, this was a great conversation.
Thank you, guys.
You packed a lot into a short amount of time. Keep going with what you're doing. But you're definitely hopefully inspiring a lot of folks at home to continue to pursue their passions, or to start something that maybe they didn't think that they could do and need to be a little bit more delusional.
Yeah, there you go.
But
there
this
you
has
go.
been another great episode of 1111 Podcast. For those who want to reach you, where can they reach you?
LinkedIn, Solomon Mangham, first and last name. Instagram is Corporate Solo with a K.
Okay.
I'm not really on TikTok or any other social media. Probably gonna delete my Instagram one day.
Okay.
Like in the next year or so, I'm gonna just have my business pages that are doing my work. But I don't really personally need one, other than to get the fits off. But
I hear it. All right. But no, this is a great episode of 1111 Podcast. And you know what? Stay delusional. We'll
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.